For those I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Professor Janine O'Flynn, and I have the great privilege of being the Director of the Crawford School of Public Policy. When I returned to the ANU to take on the role of Director in January 2023, an envelope with a gold crest arrived in my mailbox. A note inside generously congratulated me on my appointment to the Crawford School, quote, "a wonderful institution," and said, "and they are lucky to have you." I beamed, and the note was, of course, from none other than our guest keynote speaker this evening, the Honourable Dr. Jim Chalmers, a proud ANU alum. It remains to this day, almost 3 years later, pinned to my wall in my office, symbolic of the generous welcome that I received when I came back to the ANU, and also the deep relationship between the ANU and the Commonwealth. But it also serves as an important reminder to me every day of the expectations that others have of us to steward this wonderful institution. So a very personal thank you to the Treasurer today for his lovely note almost 3 years ago and for joining us here today. He's been a great friend to the Crawford School over the last few years. We began our Crawford School Alumni Dialogue series in Indonesia last year. In Jakarta, our keynote was delivered by the then Minister of Finance, Sri Mulyani, a great friend of the Treasurer. And I've often said I'll never be as famous as I was that day when I was on her Instagram post that night. No one's ever as famous as being on her Instagram. We followed with a panel of our eminent alum to hear from them about the pressing policy issues that were confronting Indonesia. It was a smash hit, about 300 people in Jakarta, and so we followed this with alumni dialogues in Papua New Guinea last year, and just last week, or was it this week, we returned from a 2-week delegation to Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam. We met with hundreds of our alum from the Crawford School. We had dialogues across those nations, from the most senior officials to our newest alumni graduates, alongside meeting with our partners and friends. And next year we'll be visiting Bhutan and China to do the same. We started this initiative in 2024 to shine a light on the incredible achievements of our alumni across the region, and it's been a wonderful way to do that. Our alum are amazing and they change the world. It's also true to say that these events and our larger delegations have helped fulfil the very special diplomatic role that is expected of the ANU, and we're privileged to play our part in pursuing that mission. It's a real delight then to host our first Crawford School Alumni Dialogue here in Canberra to focus on Australia in a changing world, policy challenges and opportunities. I'll have some more to say now. We're on a very tight deadline time-wise this morning, but it's important to say that next year we will approach our official 20th anniversary alongside the ANU as it celebrates its 80th. For now, let me say how happy I am to see everybody here. I'm proud alumni of one of the world's leading public policy schools that you all have helped to build. I'm delighted this evening to invite the Australian National University's Interim Vice-Chancellor and President, Professor Rebecca Brown, to formally open the event and to introduce our key speaker. The Vice-Chancellor is a multi-award winning educator, researcher and academic leader in the field of environmental studies, her specialisation being in urban water, sustainable development and transdisciplinary methods. She's a Fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences and has a background as an award-winning and practising civil engineer on mega infrastructure projects across the UK, Europe, Southeast Asia and Africa. Prior to joining us here at the ANU in 2024, Professor Brown was the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Research and Senior Vice President at Monash. So please join me in welcoming her to the stage this evening.
Thank you, Janine, and good evening, everyone, and welcome. What a wonderful occasion and such a terrific initiative. It's terrific to have this dialogue at this time. I acknowledge and celebrate the traditional lands we're meeting on today, the land of the Ngambri and Ngunnawal peoples, on lands which have never been ceded and are always sacred, and it's a real privilege to meet and engage on these precious lands. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us here today. I'm also delighted to acknowledge tonight's keynote speaker, the Honourable, and if I may, Dr. Jim Chalmers, Australian Treasurer, and more notably an ANU alum. It's a real pleasure to be here for celebrating Crawford Alumni in Canberra, part of the Crawford School Alumni Dialogue Series, and to see so many of you gathered to reconnect, reflect, and celebrate your shared impact on public policy in Australia and, of course, beyond. The Crawford School of Public Policy has a long and distinguished history as Australia's leading graduate school for public policy, and I think, Janine, as you just indicated, one of the leading global schools for public policy. Many of you here this evening are graduates, and you've played very pivotal roles across government, business and civil society. Each of you shape decisions, influence debates, and deliver outcomes that improve lives and strengthen communities. This evening is about recognising your contribution and reaffirming the enduring connection between ANU and the people who have studied here. Your work reflects the very best of ANU, rigorous thinking based on evidence, research and collaboration, and really importantly, in the service of public good. Tonight's theme, Australia in a Changing World, Policy Challenges and Opportunities, could not be more timely. We're living through an era of nothing short of rapid transformation, economic uncertainty, technological disruption, shifting global power dynamics and profound social and not least environmental change. These are indeed very complex issues, but they're exactly the kinds of challenges that ANU and you at Crawford are uniquely equipped to help Australia, support Australia navigate. Through Crawford's research, teaching and partnerships, Crawford continues to equip leaders with the skills and judgment to bring clarity, courage, importantly courage, and collaboration to the policy conversations that matter most. So, as I've already mentioned, we are delighted to acknowledge the Honourable Jim Chalmers, Australia's Treasurer, as tonight's keynote speaker. Following his address, a panel of distinguished alumni, Penny Williams, Helen Hang, Dr. Hang, and David Scaife, will explore how Australia can remain competitive, resilient, and inclusive in a changing world. Their combined expertise reflects the depth and diversity of the Crawford Alumni Network and the strength of the ANU policy community. Before I invite our Treasurer to the stage, I want to thank Professor Janine O'Flynn and the Crawford School team for their work in bringing this evening together and for their leadership in engaging our alumni community. I hope tonight inspires new ideas and new connections. This is what it means to be part of our Crawford School and the ANU community. It's now my real honour and pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honourable Dr. Jim Chalmers, MP, Treasurer of Australia. Dr. Chalmers has served as Treasurer since May 22 and has now delivered 3 federal budgets. He holds a PhD in political science and international relations from here at the ANU and a first-class honours degree in public policy from Griffith University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jim Chalmers.
Hi everyone. This invitation to join with you tonight was a nice surprise and I'm especially grateful for it. I want to thank Rebecca for her kind introduction a moment ago. I want to thank Janine as well for the opportunity to be here with you tonight. And I of course begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people and any First Nations friends who are with us in the very comfortable seats of the Dome tonight. I wanted to thank Roz and Jess and Shanti and everyone from the Crawford team for all of the work that goes into a gathering of this nature, and also to acknowledge and thank Frank, Helen, David and Penny, who will be part of what I'm sure will be a very engaging discussion shortly. When we were hearing about Sri Mulyani a moment ago, it reminded me of the time that Penny and I have spent in Indonesia. Penny as a very, very distinguished ambassador Australian Ambassador to Indonesia. I wanted to thank her in particular for all of the help that she gave a newish treasurer navigating the G20 and particularly in Indonesia. So thank you very much, Penny, for all of your help and wonderful and wise counsel. When I was having a think on the weekend about what I would say to such an accomplished group of people on such an important occasion, I began poking around the ANU Distinguished Alumni webpage for some inspiration. And it struck me then, and it strikes me again now, that no list like that, however distinguished it was, with a former Australian Prime Minister, a former Indonesian Foreign Minister and other high office holders, not even a list like that can do justice to the thousands of people who have spent time here, who are now making a contribution right across society and including right across government. So tonight is primarily a celebration of you, and it's one that I'm proud to be a little part of, because I want to talk to you tonight about how you become a bigger part of a bigger story. I want to say a few things about how we do justice to this remarkable opportunity that we've been given by this university, whether it's at Crawford from 2006 onwards, or before that at the various different schools which preceded it. Now, I'm conscious that at the end of a long parliamentary fortnight, this might not seem like the best timing to be reflective about these things. I'm conscious that any of you who are engaged in the work of the Parliament may have a lowish battery, or maybe you think that I'm just projecting. But I have always found this place, this university, I have always found it and the people here really energising. If politics is carbohydrates and policy is protein, then this school and this university is like some enormous bain-marie of intellectual nourishment. And that's why I cherished my time here. It's why my relationship with the ANU didn't end when I graduated from here. It's why I absolutely loved spending time here on campus with Kim Beazley when I worked for him, because he used to stay at University House as opposition leader. It's why I enjoyed getting people from here at ANU up to brief me when I was first elected, some very generous experts who became friends. It's why I'm so supportive of the work that Janine does and her role here with all of you colleagues. It's why I jog through this campus a bit, not enough lately, but including on Sundays before budgets, I always try and run through the ANU campus. It's become a bit of a ritual for me to clear the head before a big week. So that's all a long way of saying I love this place. I love Griffith University, where I started my studies, and I love the ANU, where I finished them, because they are two of the country's great institutions. They're about research and they're about higher learning, but they're also both trying to find higher planes for the country to operate from. And I think what separates them is this idea that understanding and analysing is only part of our task. What matters is what we do with it, how we put that into practice, how we use it to lift other people up, and how we inform the decisions which can ensure that Australia takes its rightful place in the first rank of comparable countries. It's a big and serious responsibility, and I know that you all embrace it here. Now, when I was over the other side of the campus as a student, I wrote about leadership and I wrote about Paul Keating. And I wish I knew then what has become my favourite Paul story. It's made public in his interviews with Kerry O'Brien, but shared privately and widely before and after, and I think relevant to us here tonight. Now, in this story, Paul walks into the men's room at Old Parliament House and he encounters Jim Cairns washing his hands. And Jim Cairns is wearing his Vietnam moratorium badge. And Jim Cairns says to the young Keating, he asks him why he's not wearing his badge. And Paul says to Jim Cairns something like, "The difference between me and you, mate, is you came here to protest. I came here to run the joint." And I thought of this story and I thought of you guys here last week speaking with a new cohort of Treasury graduates about the opportunity ahead of them, thinking about the opportunity presenting itself to our country and more broadly, and how we grab it together. I spoke to them about the roles that they could play in that and why they matter. And I enjoyed spending time with them because their questions that afternoon reflected a level of ambition that we don't always see in our politics, and I think to our detriment. They're here and we're here to run the joint, and what a time to run it. When I finished up here at the ANU 2 decades ago, and when Crawford's first incarnation began around the same time, nobody was really expecting the 2 decades of upheaval that we've seen in the global economy since then. In that time, we've had 4 major economic shocks: a global financial crisis, a major pandemic, a worldwide inflation shock, and now the fallout from resurgent protectionism and escalating trade tensions. Now, these rolling crises are no longer punctuation points between long periods of calm. They've been normalised for the time being, but they haven't been neutralised. And it's not yet clear whether the world will keep muddling through as it has been, or whether there'll be some kind of reckoning, like a sharper correction in the global economy. But it's useful to remember that Australia was a major beneficiary of what's called the Great Moderation between the end of the Cold War and the beginning of the GFC. Now, our job now together is to work out how we can be major beneficiaries of all of this perpetual churn and change, just like we were major beneficiaries of the global order that prevailed before the world's economy went bang and then berserk. Now, to help us understand this moment, I've come to really value the framework that splits post-Federation Australia into 3 economies. The first one, in the early 1900s, agricultural, colonial. The second, after World War II, still agricultural, but increasingly industrial and behind the tariff war. The third, from the 1980s, opened up to the world with financial services becoming a much bigger part of our economic story. Now, I like this historical sweep for 3 main reasons, and each of these reasons, I think, are relevant to us here today. The first lesson is each big shift took leadership to land it. Second, each of these shifts were punctuated by the sort of upheaval that we've seen over these recent years of contiguous shocks. And third, if each new economy arrives every 40 years or so, as they have been, then that means that we're due for a new one now. Not because the old one's completely busted or because we want to turn our back on what's got us to here, but because without a new growth model for our economy, we won't reach our potential as a people at a pretty remarkable time in our history. We can build this 4th economy at the intersection of energy and technology against the backdrop of geography, demography, and geopolitics. And this means some of the old artificial distinctions between the disciplines at universities no longer really exist, and I think that's well understood here. The private sector will play the defining role in this big shift, but that doesn't mean the 4th economy will build itself. It will take ambition and courage, and it will take leadership to build a new economy powered by cleaner and cheaper energy and turbocharged by AI. And that's why I want you all to understand that this is a big moment for us as a country, and we can't talk ourselves out of it. We can't spend our time ambling slowly along the path of least resistance, not when the pace of change in the world is accelerating, because that path of least resistance leads to mediocrity and malaise. Instead, we can make this a defining decade filled with opportunity in a world of uncertainty, but only with your help, only with your ideas, only with your ambition. Only if you use what you've learned here and what you research here to play a bigger part in a bigger story of Australian success that benefits more of our people, where we modernise our economy together and build a new growth model together at that intersection of energy and technology, and where we lift living standards together. And we did all of that because we made the right calls and the big calls for the right reason, well-intentioned and well-informed. I think that's the test for all of you, and it's a test for all of us in your line of work and in mine, to actually run the joint, not just occupy the space, to do justice to the opportunity that the world is dangling in front of us and the opportunity that this country and this university has given us. I thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. Thanks so much.
I know you're on a very tight schedule, Treasurer. Thank you for joining us, and I know you worked very hard to fit us in this evening. Last time you spoke at the Crawford School, you told me about your habit of running on the campus, and I gave you a hoodie because you're always running when it's very cold. The sun is shining. You have an ANU hoodie, but now I want you to have a Crawford t-shirt so that next time that you're spotted running around the campus, everyone will know how much you love the Crawford School. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we'll look forward to the photos of the Crawford t-shirt on your back very soon. Treasurer, thank you so much. Colleagues, it's really my pleasure now to invite our Crawford alumni and facilitator to come and join us up on the stage. And as they do, let me do some introductions of each. Here they come. Dear, I've had a long day. I can call everybody dear today. Dr. Helen Huang. Helen is an economist and the founder and CEO of HP Global X and Economics for Kids, a pioneering initiative transforming complex economic and policy ideas into engaging educational games and story-driven learning experiences. She's the author of Economics for Kids, From Fables to Fairy Tales, an Amazon bestseller, and sitting right beside her there on the stage today. She has over 15 years of experience across government, academia and the private sector. She's a passionate advocate for inclusive and future-ready economics, and she bridges research, creativity and community empowerment. Her work champions economic literacy, innovation and human-centred policy as drivers that can enable Australia not only to stay resilient in a changing world, but to thrive as a fair, forward-looking and globally connected nation. She graduated with her PhD from the Crawford School of Public Policy in 2020 and has master's degrees in economic policy, applied economics and development studies. That's 3 masters, not 1. Please join me in welcoming Helen tonight. Next, I'm very pleased to welcome David Scaife, MLA, to our panel. David is a member of the West Australian Parliament, elected first in 2021 and re-elected in 2025. Yeah, that's great, thanks David. He's currently the Parliamentary Secretary to the Premier of Western Australia. And prior to stepping into politics, his career was as an industrial relations lawyer. David took his Bachelor of Arts with honours and a Bachelor of Laws at the University of Western Australia, followed by a Master of Laws at University College London. We were delighted that he chose to join us to undertake the Master of Public Policy at the Crawford School, and he graduated last year. David, I asked you this out the front, but I want you to explain to us all later how you started your Master of Public Policy degree the same year you were elected. You still managed to graduate top of your class, taking out the Master of Public Policy prize and be a parent. Let us in on your secrets later, please. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, David. And last but definitely not least, I'm delighted to welcome Penny Williams to our panel. Penny served as an Australian ambassador to Indonesia from 2021 until January 2025. Her prior roles include Deputy Secretary in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and High Commissioner to Malaysia. She was Australia's first ambassador for women and girls and was awarded a Public Service Medal in 2015 for her outstanding public service in that position. Penny is a trustee of the Asia Foundation, an international non-profit development organisation focused on Asia and the Pacific, and she's also a distinguished advisor at ANU's National Security College. Penny holds a Bachelor of Asian Study with honours and a Masters of Applied Anthropology and Participatory Development from the ANU. And in October this year, she received an honorary doctorate from Western Sydney University. So I'd like to be able to say, welcome, Dr. Williams. Thank you. And finally, I'm delighted to introduce our facilitator this evening, my wonderful Crawford School colleague, Professor Frank Yotso. Frank is Professor of Environmental and Climate Change Economics, and he heads up the Centre for Climate and Energy Policy in the Crawford School. He's widely recognised as one of Australia's leading climate change economists, and he's held a range of significant advisory roles with governments, international organisations and private businesses in Australia and overseas. And he's been a lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He currently serves as Commissioner of the New South Wales Net Zero Commission, Chair of the Queensland Clean Economy Expert Panel, and as a member of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Recently, Frank led the Australian Carbon Leakage Review for the Commonwealth Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. And at the ANU, he previously held roles as Head of Energy at the ANU Institute for Climate, Energy and Disaster Solutions, and as Director of the ANU Zero Carbon Energy for Asia Pacific Grand Challenge Initiative. And if you ever put on the ABC radio in the morning, you're sure to hear Frank. In fact, he was interviewed 3 times just the other day. I told him I heard him once, and he said, I was interviewed 3 times in one day. Frank, enough from me. Let me hand over the stage to you for our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Janine. Thanks very much, Janine. Thank you very much, panelists, and very warm welcome once again, dear guests. And I guess this starts the semi-formal part of the evening, doesn't it, Janine? With the informal part of the evening yet to come. And wasn't it fantastic to have the treasurer here with a quite an insightful speech, right? So he gave us some warm words about, the alumni community and ANU and Crawford School, but also some thoughts about the future. And I guess while he is one of the people running the joint, we can get to some intellectual nourishment now. And so we've got a few questions prepared for our distinguished panelists, and I think the intent here is to get us all thinking what we might chat about later over real nourishment. So, Treasurer, I've got a couple of quotes from the Treasurer here, which I'd like to get us all started, and you might want to respond to those, or anything else really that the Treasurer said. And David, I'm going to come to you first, and then Penny and Helen. The quotes are, it's not yet clear whether the world will keep muddling through, or whether there'll be some kind of reckoning. How can we be major beneficiaries of all this churn and change? A second quote is, we will build the 4th economy at the intersection of energy and technology against the backdrop of geography, demography, and geopolitics. So, David, the Treasurer has left the building. What do you think of what he said?
The easy question to start. Look, I think I'm probably biased here in being a parent of a young child, but I sort of think we're always muddling through, aren't we? I certainly know that I'm muddling through. To go to Janine's question about how I did things over the last few years, the answer is having a fabulous spouse at home who I'm going to embarrass by also saying is a federal senator now as well. So we're right down here. And we're a family of political tragics, but so having good support around me, but also just making peace with the fact that you're always muddling through. When it comes to the sort of economic muddling through, I'm not an economist. I don't have Jim smarts when it comes to that sort of history of political economy, but I think whenever we look back, we kind of only look at the crises. I don't know, and there seems to be this feeling like, we're always in a crisis. That as the Treasurer said, that there was the sort of global financial crisis, and then there was the pandemic, and now and then a sort of inflationary environment. And so I guess I sometimes worry though that that's just the nature of constant economic change, and that we perhaps shouldn't be too hyperbolic about it. Having said that, there's plainly economic transformation that happens over the years, and the pressing economic transformation of our times are, automation and artificial intelligence, decarbonisation, and a geopolitical security environment, which I think you can say is different from what we had in the sort of prior 50 years, in the sort of post-war period. In terms of how we make the most of it, we need to have the political certainty and willpower, and I will say that as a politician, to grasp those opportunities, and that means having a clear agenda when it comes to decarbonisation of the economy, And being a politician, I'm obviously going to reflect on what we've seen politically, in this town over the last, weeks and months. And, I said to Frank beforehand that, it feels a little bit like Groundhog Day with the sort of political wars over climate and decarbonisation happening all over again. And what we know is that kind of political uncertainty is very, very bad for investment. It's very bad for, state governments and local governments and communities to be able to make decisions as well. And so, I personally, obviously, I would say this as a Labor politician, but, I am very supportive of the federal government just being sort of bread and butter on the issue of climate and decarbonisation. They're not sort of extreme one way or the other. They believe in the climate science, they believe in an orderly transition, and they know that if they give that certainty to people about net zero targets in our economy and interim targets as well, then that allows government, it allows community, it allows industry to make those decisions. So I guess I would say that's how government's role in muddling through is to unmuddle or to not muddle things as much as it possibly can.
Penny, you would have seen your fair share of churn and change and muddling through and trying to be the beneficiary of things.
And I tend to agree with David. I'm a bit in the, let's just all chill and take ourselves through this slowly because we've seen these sort of crises. In fact, when the Treasury talked about the sort of 4 waves, it did remind me, I'm so old that I joined the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade as a graduate in 1988. And that's when we discovered, the change of government services. And suddenly it was like, when we were the Department of Trade, what's a service? No one really knew what it was, but we knew it was really important. It's a bit like AI, just in that, we suddenly all have to know what a service is. And the way that we were taught, apologies to the economists, was something you couldn't drop on your foot. And then we went, okay, all right, so it's something that we sell that you can't drop on your foot. And actually, we kind of got across the whole services export things pretty quickly. So I tend to agree with David. Of course, it would be less messy if you could take the politics out completely in kind of working our way through it. The other thing that to me that was from the Treasurer's speech that really had resonance for me was when he talked about the geopolitics and looking at this room and the people I've met just today, and then when the Treasurer first came, what he didn't say was when he first came as Treasurer to the G20 and he had that first meeting with Sri Mulyani, almost everyone in the room had a PhD from ANU. And he said, I never knew that my PhD from ANU would be so valuable as it is in Indonesia. And actually, when I see what the Crawford School and other parts of the ANU have done to bridge the geopolitics with our closest neighbour and actually to work through some of the toughest issues around climate is actually really heartening, and it's really tangible, kind of a really tangible example of what the university can do, and the Treasurer recognises it. He trumpets his PhD from ANU every time he goes to Indonesia. And of course, part of that is the scholarship program that's just so incredibly important to what we do in the region. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but initial thoughts.
Yes, so I also resonate from Jim Chambers talk about his ritual morning run around Crawford. I have the same this feeling because I came here with a lot of curious questions, and when I finished my study, I left with also a lot of curious questions about the world. And every time I want to have a new idea, I still come to ANU. And my favorite place is Crawford School. I just go around the campus and then jot down to the lake. And the idea from the book somehow come from this as well. And it's something really I don't know, this school is so not only give me knowledge, it's also love, caring, and empathy as well. So the great thing from Crawford School is not only we learn modeling, we not only read data, we read dialogue, we read empathy. And that's why when we left school, a lot of query, a lot of things that resonated and make us transform theory into practical thing and living impact. And another thing that Jim talked about, we are facing a lot of crises, and actually we are right now in the crossroad of the significant change that human history haven't experienced before is the AI. Someone scared of AI, someone excited about AI. I'm in the middle. I'm a little bit scared, a little bit excited. But I think it doesn't matter how old you are, what generation you belong to. We have the same generation. We are generation of transition, Gen T. So how we make AI work for us and how we make this challenge become opportunity and become like the transformation of the nation. And I think Crawford School is a leading school in public policy. So I think it's grateful, it's a leader in this field. And we actually can do something special from the global network that we already set up with more than 6,000 alumni in prominent positions across Australia and Asia Pacific and worldwide. We can leverage this power, like make the change as the opportunity becomes a challenge, become opportunity for us. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll come back to that question as to how we can maximize actually the power of this fantastic alumni network that we have in Australia and in the region and in fact across the world. Before that, let's delve a little deeper on some of these questions of Australian policy responses to global pressures. And the question really is like, how can Australian policymaking adapt to these challenges that hit us? Almost all of them have already been mentioned in various forms. Climate change and low carbon transition, technological disruption, in particular AI, of course, is on everyone's minds, security challenges, demographic shifts. And where in this are the opportunities for policy innovation, institutional design, and also implementation, really, to help us deal with new challenges in better ways. And Helen, if you allow, we'll stay with you. And your book has already been mentioned. I've only got volume 1 here, but volume 2. And when I discussed this with my team, one of my team pointed out that you actually managed to discuss the 3 little pigs in here as well, with regard to economic collapse and crash. So maybe that's something that you could riff on as well.
Thank you.
Really, the question is about economic literacy for the young generation.
So, actually, this book is quite special for me, quite personal, because I wrote it for my son. He's grade 9 when I have this idea, and we are like stopping around Canberra, and he always asked me to buy a toy, book, a lot of things. And I try to explain for him that we need to make choices. We cannot have everything at once. He tried to not really listen. And I think it's really hard to explain for 9 years old boy, understand about choices and scarcity. And I think it's a good time to teach him. Because he's make decisions every day. He needs to be responsible about it. He needs to learn about how the world works, how economy works. And I think even economists like me also struggling to find the resources to explain for him. And I think maybe I use something he already know, he already love, like fable and fairy tale, and simplify it to explain for him. So the fable I use is fun and short, and children already know. It's like bedtime story, and with that little bit introduce the economic concept in that. And he enjoyed it. He yeah, Mom, well done. I love it. And he is the first serious reviewer for my book. And then we started with 10 stories, and I think, maybe other kids also need it. Other parent educators also need it. And we published on Amazon, and yeah, amazing happened. It's like travel around the world now. And here, so I think economic literacy also very quiet crisis in Australia. I did do some research, and I see that it's like the headache issues that RBA warning now. 1 in 6 Australian teens fail basic finance, and year 12 economic enrollment dropped 70% over 30 years. Situation doesn't improve, and I think the recent research from RBA also indicates that if we introduce economic earlier for them, they is more engaging, become like the more engaged citizen. And I think they point out sometimes, they did a survey with like years 7 to 10, 4,000 students in New South Wales, and the results show that they're interested in the topic, but really schools, they lack of resources to provide for them. Yeah, so I think it's a very important tool that we provide for children to become the better citizen. And I think we need to introduce ethics to this as well. So my idea is the economic literacy with ethics and technology, because in the era of AI, we need to introduce something interesting, engaging for them. We live into 21st century, but we cannot use the map of 20th century. We need something like the more updating is a 21st century compass map. And that's why my program is like the ecosystem, including book, games. So it's like economic literacy, but with ethics and technology.
Ethics and technology, big topic. David, how can we do better in policy, even better, keep doing better in policy design and implementation? You've already shared a few thoughts on decarbonisation and climate. Would you like to touch on any of the other topics that are hot?
Yeah, well, I might talk about sort of one of the thoughts I've had about policy innovation, and it's not a necessarily particularly new idea, but what's I think common to all of these challenges is that economic transition and that economic transformation, and we should never forget that. We can talk about GDP or economic growth, but at the end of the day, we're talking about people and we're talking about communities. And I know obviously there are many communities across Australia that are that are subject to the sort of climate. Particularly the sort of economic sharp end of the climate transition, and one of those is the community of Collie in Western Australia, which is our coal mining town, our coal-fired power generation town. And we're not perfect, but the Western Australian government has, I think, done a pretty good job at we have a just transition authority for that region that includes voices from workers and from the community and from industry as well. And we have established, a dedicated fund that looks at supporting projects for Collie, like a green steel recycling mill, Magnium project as well. And I guess, but what I wanted to come to in terms of policy innovation is, the point I want to make is that you have to listen to people and bring people with them. And I know Penny was being sort of tongue-in-cheek when she sort of said it'd be always good to take the politics out of it. But, that's what we have to grapple with, right? Is how do we take the politics? Because the politics is all about how do we preserve our democracy and our democratic participation as we kind of go through economic change. That's a fundamental challenge for a politician. And so deliberative democracy has been something that's been around now for sort of 30 plus years. I remember reading Amy Gutman from Princeton about deliberative democracy in my undergraduate arts degree. But deliberative democracy is that idea that you give people more of a kind of opportunity to be involved in the conversation, whether it's through citizens' assemblies or it's through workshops and town halls, and it's a really kind of intensive form of democracy. I think one of the challenges for deliberative democracy previously is that it's extremely resource intensive to do. That's why we have a representative democracy. It's much more efficient. You don't need to spend as much time, as much human power on it. But I wonder with AI and the rise of sort of our digital economy, if we could create some platforms that are more inclusive. We've got a lot of toxic online platforms, unfortunately, but some inclusive deliberative forums where government could really lean into putting decision making out to people in that sort of more dynamic, more deliberative way, rather than people just relying on having a vote every 4 years. And I think that's one of the innovations I would like to see us sort of developing.
Yeah, inclusivity, economic literacy, policy literacy, of course, all topics that are very dear to our hearts at ANU in particular as the national university. Penny?
I guess when I think about policy, and I'm thinking of it from a bureaucratic perspective, as a sort of long-term bureaucratic, and thinking about good policy that has innovation rather than innovative policy, because bureaucrats, as soon as you say innovative policy, kind of set up the beanbags and labs and whatever, rather than like actually how we're going to do it. But at the end of the day, I really do think, which gets to that sort of task force, that as you need to engage a whole system, it needs to be collaborative, and you need to acknowledge the cultures of all those involved. Now, that should be something pretty easy, except I think that the federal bureaucracy still struggles with that. That's partly because the bureaucracy and the functions have been set up around functions rather than what we're trying to achieve. We're not going to get rid of that, but we need to acknowledge it. And a bit like universities as well, sort of an impediment to good policy sometimes is the fight for the dollar. So you can get, the sort of famous Canberra IDCs where you all go in and no one shows their hand because we don't want to put our department in the front line for having to pay for it. There are impediments, and we need to acknowledge that, and then come up with innovative ways to engage with people. I agree, and then implement. So many things are sort of they just sort of wane over maybe 5 years. You can't see what the starting point was. I was really, really lucky at a sort of very micro level in Jakarta as ambassador. It's our biggest embassy, and we have a huge number of agencies there, and we actually could work really collaboratively together because people were sufficiently senior that they felt that they had some autonomy. They didn't have to check in with head office, and we could actually kind of brainstorm policy solutions and send them back into the system and actually get a bit of traction. I mean, it's pretty sort of micro stuff, but it actually shows that the moment everyone wasn't in a competition or worried about what the hierarchy was doing and felt that we were all in it together, that there was collaboration, but we were also bureaucratically acknowledging the culture of everybody else. So I knew that the AFP wasn't going to write in-depth political cables, but we also knew that, everyone had an asset, and we had to sort of admit that or acknowledge that up front, and that, I think, helped us. I think you can transfer that, especially if it's leadership-driven, into the sorts of task forces that you were talking about, but it does take some acknowledgement of what are the sort of impediments to driving that good policy in the first place.
And of course, a place like Australia's embassy to Indonesia is an amazing place in terms of the issues that get dealt with, the people that come through, the consequences that some of these decisions have, isn't it? Okay, and with that, let's come to Australia's place in a changing world. Penny, the thing about the fight for the dollar. Very, very unfortunately, Australia's universities at this point in time know a thing or two about that one. But Australia's place in changing world. So big questions, some controversial questions. What can we do to maintain Australia's standard of living, which is an extremely high one, of course, as we are often reminded of when we interact with our many students from the region, and our security. And what do we think about the global geopolitical shifts? How does that influence Australia's foreign, domestic policy priorities? How do we position relative to the US under Trump and relative to China in particular and other powers? Penny, should we stay with you?
Okay. And I don't know if I'm going to sort of traverse the Trump-China thing, because I think everyone in this room has heard it, and I think we've also gotten quite used to the complex geopolitical challenges that we face. I want to kind of give a mini report card for the government, I think, because I think they, and I'm no longer a bureaucrat, I think they've done a really remarkable job. And the reason I think they've done that is because they haven't jumped at shadows, and they've taken it really carefully. I think it helps to be a second-term government too, and probably looking potentially at a third, or thinking that they're looking at a third. And I think that it helps that a number of the senior cabinet ministers were very, very experienced in dealing with those issues. I think that often first-term governments, just even having the conversation is hard. Like, what do I talk to about this person? And I think you can see the trail. It's just so deftly woven through the government's narrative, particularly the foreign minister, but also the PM and the treasurer. It's very tight. The narrative, like we need to, our way we engage with the world reflects who we are. It's just very kind of deliberate and well thought through. And then when we get to things that are really complicated, once again, I think the government's done an exceptional job in not jumping at shadows. I think the way the PM has engaged with the US was really excellent, and I think also how the way we've managed worked with China is also, and the region. I mean, the effort that the minister herself has put into Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Where I'd give a really low score though is, and this has been kind of trailing off for decades now, is on Asia capability. I think it's really actually. We're at a national security crisis in terms of our Asia capability. And of course, it's like, what, 25, when did Roscoe know? 1989, did Australia and the Northeast Asia ascendancy. And it was different then, right? It was when we were first saying that you drop a service is something you don't drop on your foot. But actually, the dynamic is different, we've got a different population, the world circumstances, but actually the story that we have to talk about is actually pretty dire. And in fact, the Education Committee of the House of Reps is doing an inquiry, and I really want people to take it seriously, much more than an issue of education and language or culture. Like, it's sort of a nice to have. That isn't AI going to solve this? No, because AI doesn't give that sort of cultural instinct. AI doesn't solve these issues for you. But just some really compelling statistics since the Garneau report, the number of years 12 studying either Chinese, Japanese or Indonesia is actually lower than when Garneau wrote his report in 1989. Since 2010, the proportion of Australian high school students enrolled in Chinese, Japanese or Indonesian has fallen from 25% to 3.3%. And in 2023, there was about 1 million domestic Australian students at universities, and only just under 500 were studying Indonesian. And on current predictions, no Australian schools will be left teaching Indonesian by 2031. So you'd have to say that when we look into the future, that something actually does need to be done, not just on the supply side, but on the demand side. Why is business not asking for these skills? How are we not actually getting our population of Asia background? Numbers of kids of Chinese background studying Chinese at school has also dropped quite significantly because of the scoring. So actually I think the government's done an amazing job. They've got a huge challenge. It is a wicked problem. It's a policy question, and I think requires everyone to really be part of. So I'm very committed to it, and I know a lot of people are, but it is really something that's a problem for us going forward.
And I think we can say the supply side at the university level is covered, right? The universities stand ready to provide Asia capability,
Yeah.
but, you know, that demand is needed,
Exactly.
The prospects are needed, the incentives perhaps.
Yeah, it's exactly that, Frank. It's not just about giving universities more money to teach more students Indonesian.
It's that as well, though.
It doesn't, I mean, that helps, but it doesn't start there. It doesn't start there.
That's right. David, something tells you if I asked you for a report card for government, you might give it a good one. So we won't ask that question. Just an open-ended question to you, really. How can we position for good standard of living into the future?
Yeah, look, it's mainly because I fear my wife when it comes to the federal government's report card. No, look, on the living standards issue, I'm going to do a very brief defence of being a Western Australian, of the resources-based economy, because I want to take one point from what Jim talked about, because Jim talked about these sort of three economies, right? But if you really kind of thought about it, agriculture was a common thread across all three economies, and indeed, off you could say, maybe perhaps the last two, mineral resources have also been a feature of them. And so, even though we're going through economic transformation and we might have a sort of fourth economy, that doesn't necessarily mean that some of the fundamentals need to change. And I do think that there's sometimes this disparaging way that we talk about our primary industries, and I've heard this before, that Australia is nothing but a quarry and a farm, and that gets put particularly about Western Australia as well. And the point I would make is that yes, there's some truth to that. Western Australia, to go to that out my home jurisdiction that I'm most familiar with, 40% of Australia's grain exports come out of Western Australia. 40% of Australia's total export value is iron ore, which is, basically universally from the Pilbara and to some extent the Midwest and the Kimberley of Western Australia. Those are staggering numbers for a state that is 11% of the population of the country. And I guess the point I want to make is that we might be a quarry and a farm, but do you know what people always need? Food and minerals. They need food and resources. And so if Australia can be the best farm and the best quarry in the world, that actually sets us up on its own for a very strong economic future. But being the best quarry and the best farm means decarbonisation and producing green products. It means having, and something that I don't think we've achieved yet, which is, proper protection and respect for, the cultural heritage values of our regions. It's about making sure that everybody in Australia benefits from the dividends that come from those industries as well, which we have growing inequality, I think, in Australia and in Western Australia as well. A lot of our richest region, the Pilbara, has also got some of our poorest remote communities. So I guess I wanted to say that I don't necessarily think we need to radically change what we're doing. I think that Australia has, for a long time been an outward-focused export economy, and that we can continue to produce very high-quality agricultural and mineral resources. But we do need to work on getting better value out of those resources, whether that is things like, green hot briquetted iron, for example, which there are several proposals for in Western Australia, whether that is, for example, in our canola industry, rather than exporting the raw seed. We export almost all of our canola, which comes out of Western Australia. All of Australia's canola goes to Europe and is then crushed and then made into a biofuel, but we don't do any of that here. And so getting further along that value chain is absolutely something we could do, but in keeping with that decarbonisation agenda.
And of course, zero emissions processing of minerals and metals resources is something that is really quite big in ANU research these days as well, with a view to safeguarding that economic advantage, making use of Australia's abundant renewable energies resource for the world as well as for us. Helen, what about the role of innovation in all of this?
Oh yes, so I think in terms of foreign policy, I think some point from Penny really resonate with me. Like, we are facing a lot of challenge, but 3 pillars from foreign policies that Australia currently facing is like the relationship with the US, relationship with China, and relationship with Indo-Pacific country. So for China, so I think the current government doing so well. Like, we collaborate when we can, but we disagree when we must do. I think strategy is very important, because we can supply with China, and we also reduce the risk from the influence of China in the region. And the second relationship that we are maintaining is the relationship with the US. The second Trump administration really challenging, but the government doing really well. PM, that's I think the strategy is not. We spend on defense not because of dependency, but because of the national interest and our capacity. And the way that the government the PM distant from the influence of the US is very strategic. And another pillar that I think that Australians are facing right now is a relationship with Indo-Pacific nation. We leverage not really traditional donor. We collaborate with them, and it's kind of like shipping model from traditional donors to innovation creation partnership. And a lot of things happen right now is a very initiative. And the thing is, we need to think carefully about the shipping economic model from traditional commodity export to innovation, technology, partnership with other countries. And I think the challenge right now is the AI and net zero strategic policy is kind of like the tool leverage for Australia to testing our social contract, and also can refine the policy and help with become the comparative advantages, and help Australia become the connector nation in the region. And I think the challenges becomes the opportunity for us to try if we use it in the strategic way. And we have resources, we have a important location in in the Asia Pacific. And I think Australia, with the world-class experts and policy maker, we totally can doing that. And in terms of domestic policy, we also need to focus on 3 pillars that I take away from Jim's talk today. So agriculture no longer is the main product, but it's necessary. But in terms of the technology shock, we have a technology shock, demographic shock, climate change shock, and our net zero policy is a kind of like the initiative that we leading as a nation as well. And the restructuring in the economy also important, like how to retrain the worker from declining industry, move to the increased industry, like worker from mining industry can retrain to become the worker in the care industry or renewable industry. So I think it's very...
All right, so may I ask you for one last round of very quick comments before we go actually to an opportunity for questions and comments if there's appetite. And this really relates to the Crawford School Alumni Network. And so Jim Chalmers said this very, very correctly said, this is a celebration of you, the Crawford School alumni community, and we can do this only with your help, only with your ideas, and only with your ambition. So can I ask you each, how has your time at Crawford School helped you manage complexities in your career, in your complex careers? And how would you say can the alumni of Crawford School and the network overall make an even bigger difference? Penny, can we go to you first?
I guess I'll start with where I was talking before. I actually think the alumni of the Crawford School is a huge asset in the way that we together in this region navigate some of these complexities. I think when people study together and they deal with complex issues and policy questions in the classroom, actually it builds kind of relationships that you can deal with them at an official level or at an academic level. It's just a door opener. It's just gold. It's just gold. Janine came up on that visit, and it's just like, it means something. It really means something, because people have built personal relationships. It's not quite the same as the Crawford School, but I was an exchange student to Indonesia when I was 16 for a year, and it changed my way of thinking about the world. I learned Indonesia. I put myself in the shoes of others. I could see a different perspective, and I think the Crawford School does that on steroids in terms of bringing different perspectives and being able to see the other perspective, and then working across borders to actually shape global, regional solutions to sort of challenges that we face at the moment. So the kind of moment is even more now because of the complexity of the issues that we face.
Helen, your perspective as a PhD of Crawford?
Yes, so I think a lot of things that I learned from Crawford that I carry along my journey and really leverage for me. And I always grateful all the knowledge I learned from this school and the relationship, the asset follow my journey. I think Crawford School is the it's not like any school in the world. We come here with knowledge and we live with like a relationship and the connection that we like learn is a transformative knowledge, not only narrow in policy. It gives us like the flexibility that we can apply in any discipline. That's what I do. Like I learn is a policy with a purpose, and when I want to tackle any issue, I just come from theory to practice. And the Crawford School equivalent is a like system thinking in poly-crisis. We always think the problem from different perspectives with different heads. And the amazing is the alumni is from different discipline and different area. So it's like the huge global network already set up, and can help us to set up like living policy lab that we can connect with different areas. And in this school, we can testing the model at small scale, and we got the feedback from world-class experts because we scale up. And I think that's amazing school that give for me that nowhere in the world we can have this experience. And from this school, we learn knowledge, we read data, we listen dialogue, and we have empathy. That's the emotional intelligence that AI cannot replace the human. It's a valuable asset along my journey.
And David, this is of course the point where you tell us your secrets about how to get all of these things done and so well.
Yeah, thank you. Look, on what I've got out of doing the MPP and graduating recently, I think I can't necessarily select a particular tool that I use, but it caused me to be much more intentional about my engagement with policy and my engagement with the public service as well as an elected member. And I think that there probably needs to be more of that. I'm a political animal. That's all second nature to me. But the policy is something that was not necessarily going to be a strength of mine, and it often isn't a strength of our sort of political representatives. But they do a necessary job as well. But I guess I would like to see. I wanted to see more bridging of that kind of divide, and I certainly felt as well that having done the degree and being able to be a bit more intentional about policy making was also sending a signal to some of the public servants that I work with that I'm interested and I'm here to do the sort of heavy thinking as well. I'm not just here, I am here to think about the politics, don't get me wrong, that occupies a lot of my time, but I'm here, I respect the disciplines that you all work in and wanted to skill myself up more. In terms of getting more out of the sort of alumni network, I would just sort of echo Penny's point about the sort of value of the alumni network and the regional reach of the alumni network. And I'll confess here to something that people might not know, which is that I've never set foot on the ANU campus because I was an online COVID student and I carried on that way from Perth, and actually ANU offering those courses online opened up an opportunity for me to study at ANU that wouldn't have been available for me as an elected member in WA. I can't just skip out of my job to Canberra. And so, finding more ways to engage with the alumni network through those digital platforms, I think, there's just so many people around the world, the country and the world, who are alumni of ANU, and being able to find those sort of accessible platforms, because that is, to go to the sort of the question, Frank, that is how I did it. I did it online. I couldn't possibly have done the MPP from Perth, and have a newborn son, middle of the way through it as well. And so having that flexibility in the remote engagement was, a critical part to me being able to start and finish.
Yeah, and thanks to COVID, we quickly offered online and kind of rapidly got reasonably good at it too. Now, just negotiated with Jess in the back there on timing for the Q&A, and the result is 3 minutes. We've got 3 minutes that we can. So please indicate who would like the mic. Gentleman in the middle, just give me a nod already for the next one so we can queue up. Who will be next? Just give me a nod. Okay, in the front here behind Janine.
Thanks for the panel. It's been quite thought-provoking. I'd like to talk on the innovation and also the money conversation that came through. One of the key requirements for innovation is slack in the system. However, as public servants, we're driven to be efficient and use all that money in the delivery of service. So there's a conflicting area of producing the slack in the system that supports innovation while also being efficient. And then the flip side is that innovation brings with it the risk of failure, and the conversation we have as public servants or as a government with the community about we tried something and it failed, when we are expected to almost be 100% successful. How do you see that conversation, and where should we be looking to try and develop new tools or new ways of thoughts around addressing those conflicting perspectives?
How to create space?
Look, I agree, and I didn't even mention the thing about everything's a great success. Quite one area where it's almost textbook, I think, in that regard of having a bit of money to not slosh around, but a bit more money that's not maybe unprogrammed and then able to try things is quite weirdly, because it sometimes comes under attack, is the development program. Actually, because it's kind of based, I mean, it's like the theoretical basis for it is actually sort of textbook policy development. And we did some amazing things in Jakarta with climate financing. The government announced something, then we had to kind of retrofit it. But I agree with you. I don't have the answer, but I agree with you. There are some real drags on good policy when you're fighting over resources and you don't have that slack and you don't have things to try. I was sort of being a bit silly about labs before, but actually DFAT did kind of have a lab to do some sort of risk stuff around development and came up with some really good things. I don't have the answer, but I actually agree that that is a problem and that we do have to acknowledge it. And not, we have to acknowledge the contradictions in the way that we're trying to develop and deliver policy.
And our second question?
Yeah, given I'm standing between everyone and their informal time, I can start it. I'll do it as a comment, and you can turn it into a question if you want to, depending on how much time you want to give. So my name's Kathy Fussell, recent PhD graduate at Crawford. Really privileged to have had the opportunity to do that as a public servant with the federal government, and come in and with a burning question, that it was a burning question for my department and government, because you get funded to do the scholarship that way, come in and try and answer those questions here at the university with all these great other students and academics as well, and then go back into government and try and apply what you've learned, which almost feels like your second PhD, to take what you've discovered in your PhD and then try and put that into practice is hard work. And what we've found, we then have this little alumni that's within the alumni of Crawford and the broader university as well, that's growing, because the scholarship's been going for over 10 years now. And what we've sort of recently been finding is bringing that alumni together as a network's really nice. People like coming for drinks and things like that, but they tend to dwindle off over time. But when we bring them together to do something, to do a job, to solve a problem, to do a project together, they show up in both senses of the term, and they really want to help each other and contribute. So I suppose my comment is that's a really nice way to really leverage that alumni community to kind of do something together, because you've got such a massive resource of ideas and diversity. So that's my comment. You can turn it into a question if you want to, of like, have you seen that happen as well in the context you work in? But I'll leave that to Frank as to whether you want to turn that into a question or move into drinks.
If anything, that's a question for our director, I think. And so, Janine.
The director always gets the last word, I think, is the rule at the Crawford School. It's really been remarkable to sit and listen to our incredible alum, and to have a wonderful discussion here prompted by our keynote speaker, Jim Chalmers, and also have a panel moderated by my wonderful colleague, Frank Yotso. And so I really want to thank our panellists. We've got a small something so you can't forget either that you're Crawford. My wonderful colleague Shanti's bringing them. Helen? You have to run with your T-shirt as well. David, take it back to WA. And Penny, never forget you are us. And I was really, really touched actually by the discussion around things like empathy as well. When I first came back to take this job as the director of the Crawford School, I was interviewed by journalists who asked me what were the two most important things I thought that our students should leave the school with. And I said an understanding of complexity and empathy. Because to be able to address the first, you had to have the second. And so I've really been struck by some of the comments and the importance of that tonight. And also over the last couple of weeks where we've been having those discussions with our colleagues in different parts of the world around these issues. What are the policy challenges and opportunities for us, and how do our former students think about them? And what did they take from their experience here that has helped them do that? It's been a remarkable privilege to hear that. And in fact, at our last one, I did declare I had some happy tears as I was doing the closing remarks. I'll try not to do that tonight. And I also wanted to just acknowledge that the Vice-Chancellor came to spend time with us. She has 4 events tonight. And so she made some time to come here because she knows how important it is that we engage with our alum, and she's very committed to that. Next year, the Australian National University will turn 80 and the Crawford School will turn 20. We have deep roots at the ANU, and we weren't always called the Crawford School. In fact, Penny and I were having this discussion today. She said, "Am I really a Crawford alum?" And I said, "You absolutely are." We have deep roots and we've had several different names, and there's a number of foundation stones that really have brought us together. But over the last 20 years or so, we've joined together as the Crawford School to create one of the world's leading public policy schools, and we're very proud of that, and we hope that all of our alum are as well. We remain the leading public policy school in the region, and our reputation has been built on the impact we've had here in Australia and across the region. In fact, we're ranked the 6th public policy school in the world, and you should all be very proud of the part you've played in that. When I went to Indonesia last year, I had no idea that every meeting I went to, I would be presented with Crawford graduates. They were everywhere. When I went to the embassy, Penny made a point of coming in to talk to our delegation, and she said to me, "The Indonesia project, which is housed within the Crawford School, celebrated its 60th anniversary this year, are rock stars." The doors that were open to us because we came from the Crawford School and the ANU were extraordinary, and the same happened to me all week last week in Vietnam, in Laos and in Cambodia, where we were having these similar events. The power of that soft diplomacy can never be underestimated. That comes from being at the Australian National University and being at the Crawford School, and it's a very important job for us together to steward that for the future. Undertaking these dialogues has reminded us all of the extraordinary impact we have through our history, but also motivates us to reach further for even greater impact and influence. There's no doubt that the Crawford School is a global leader in public policy, and we help to produce the knowledge that shapes debate and action. We deliver learning experiences that empower policy leaders to change the world, and we nurture partnerships that transform society, and we're extraordinarily proud of that. Our alumni are such an important part of that and will continue to be. My colleagues undertake world-changing research, and they provide advice and guidance to governments, non-government organisations, private sector businesses and multinational organisations. And for them, that's simply part of their job. It's not an add-on, it's in their DNA. And my Crawford colleagues here work together to try and create a world-leading educational experience, inviting students from around the world to join together, whether they're in the classroom physically or joining us online, to develop their expertise and skills so they too can help in tackling the most complex challenges that confront us. And I've never met a team, many of them here tonight, more dedicated to that. By bringing together students from across the world to learn together, it's our aspiration to help to make a difference in the world. And we are able to see what our alum have gone on to do. We feel extremely privileged to be part of that journey. So I hope you all enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Those chairs are far too comfortable, by the way, and very hard to sit up straight in. We're soon going to move out to the Jaeger room. Jess is here to lead us, to enjoy some refreshments, a few laughs as well. Before I do that, please let me thank my wonderful colleagues for making tonight happen, especially Jessica Butters, who's standing here, Shanti Devi, who works with me, coordinating across that, and Ros Smith, and the whole team who are here, who make that happen. It's a true reflection of the culture of the Crawford School that so many wanted to come out to visit with our alum and to make tonight a special opportunity to celebrate you. And last but not least, I want to thank all of you, our wonderful alum, Crawford staff and our friends who have joined us tonight. We are so proud of everything that our alum have done already and what's yet to come. And it has been truly a privilege to share this evening with you. And I hope you enjoyed the opportunity to reconnect as well. So thank you. And please come and enjoy having some fun.